All right, so hello and welcome everybody. My name's Dan Rodney and welcome to Noble Desktop's live stream for getting started in graphic design. I've been a designer for over 20 years. I do all different types of design, from graphic design, so print design, web design, video editing and animation, and so a wide variety of things. I also do coding in addition to design. So we're going to be talking about a variety of those things tonight. Different things that different designers do, apps that they use, and help you to help choose which area of design you're interested in going in. For those of you who are attending live, I'm going to put a link in the chat so that you can refer to this presentation in the future whenever you want. For those of you who are watching the recording, you can look in the video description down below, and the link will be in the video description. To use this presentation, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard. So you can use your left and right arrow keys, or just by hitting the space bar. If you're on a touch screen, you can swipe between the slides as well. And we keep this presentation up so you don't have to worry about the slides going away. So there'll be lots of useful links and stuff in here. So what is the topic, like kind of the outline of what we're going to be discussing here tonight? We're going to talk about what is graphic design exactly. What do designers do, especially the different types of designers? What do they do? We'll show examples of their work, learn about the apps that the different types of designers use, and if you're interested in a new computer, what should you keep in mind if you're looking for a new computer? And ultimately developing a portfolio of your work. The design industry is very much focused on your portfolio. Before I even look at somebody's resume, in fact, sometimes the only reason to initially look at the resume is to get the link to their portfolio website. I want to see that portfolio website very quickly, because before I spend a lot of time looking at resumes, I want to see their work. I want to see if they're a good designer. And so I want to see that portfolio, and if the work isn't good, then I'm not going to look deeper at their resume. Only if I'm interested in the quality of their work am I going to actually look at their resume in more detail. So that's why I think having your portfolio website link very prominent on your resume or even in your cover letter is very important when looking for work. So websites are very important in the design industry. All right, so I'm going to stop my video there and let's continue on. So how do we get started in graphic design? Well, there's lots of different types of design that you can do. So you need to figure out which type of design you're most interested in. And during this presentation, we're going to talk about different types of design, show examples of the work so that it'll help you to decide what design you are most interested in doing. And then once you know the area that you want to get into, you need to learn the apps that you're going to be designing with. There'll be specific apps. Sometimes there's overlap, of course, depending on the different types of design, but you'll need to learn the apps to design with. Separately from learning the apps, you also need to learn design concepts, typography, color, composition. If it's something like websites or apps, user interaction, there might be animation with video, websites, apps. So depending on the type of design, there are different design concepts. So the apps are just the tools that you will use to design. They don't make you a good designer. You still want to understand what makes good design. So design concepts are the ideas of what makes good design. And yes, you need a tool, you need an app to design with, but that doesn't just, it's like you can't just pick up a hammer and say, I'm a carpenter. Yeah, you can bang some nails, but they're not going to necessarily put anything together in a good way. So you need to know what to do. And ultimately, if you're going to be getting good at design, you need to really practice. So practice is important. The more you practice, the better designer you're going to be. And you're practicing, you're building projects, designing things, and hopefully as you're practicing, you're going to be creating some good work. And you need to use that good work that you're building to put it into a portfolio. And that portfolio is going to be your calling card. It's going to be your way to show people that you can do this. This is very much a show me kind of field. Show me what you can do. I want to see that. Don't just tell me you're good, show me that you're good. And that's what the portfolio website is all about. And so you need to develop that portfolio. And in the beginning, it's not going to be a big portfolio, but you want to start creating some quality content, and you do need to practice to get good, and hopefully out of that practice you'll get some good pieces to put into your portfolio. So what exactly is graphic design? It's visual communication through artwork or combined images and text. So essentially, it's a visual way to communicate things. Now that's very broad because graphic design is a very broad field. It can be anywhere from designing logos, ads, social media graphics, magazines, books, websites, just anything visual. Including signage. There's all sorts of graphic design that is around us, but we're visually communicating something, essentially. There are different mediums that we work in. It could be print, it can be web, it can be apps, it can be presentations. So many different types of mediums. Some of them are physical, like print. Some of them are, many of them are digital, but lots of different mediums that we can work in. We can work in static things like print, or we can work in animated, moving things like video and animation. Now, graphic design has been around for a really long time, and because the term graphic design has been around for so long and it's so broad, it doesn't really tell people what specifically you do in graphic design. So when graphic design first got started, it was more like around print and physical things. The digital stuff hadn't come around yet. So sometimes, and this is just sometimes people will say that a graphic design is print design. Now, technically, graphic design is all of these types of design, but if somebody says they're a graphic designer, I would tend to think that they either do a lot of different things, or it could be that they're more doing print material, because graphic design, when you say it in general, could mean a lot of different things. So if you're doing web design or app design, typically there are newer things you would say, I'm a web designer, or I'm a UI designer, or a visual designer. Those are newer terms that people have come up with to, I think, differentiate themselves and say more specifically what kind of design they're doing. So if you say I'm a graphic designer, some people might associate that with you being a print designer. Not that that's necessarily true. I would always ask what kind of design the person does, but just be aware that that might make people think that you do primarily print design. So let's go through some examples of kind of general graphic design. Logo design. This is a beautiful logo here by Ignacio. He's got a bunch of amazing logos on his website. This is just one of them. And if I click on his logo there to go back and see, tons of very brilliant, beautiful logos here, like debugging, especially ingenious, beautiful, great brand identity here. The DEB forms a debug, right? It's just on its own, it's iconic, and in the letter mark here, the word mark here, it's just great. So smart. That Nutraversity, the first one that I showed, is so smart as well. It's so simple, so iconic, but it's the forks are the columns, and just such a simple, fun idea that's very iconic, very ingenious. A lot of thought goes into making a logo. If you ever think, oh, logos are easy, just because they're simple, it probably says you haven't tried doing them. When people actually start to design logos, they realize, like, wow, it's actually really hard to simplify something to just a strong essence. It's strong. It's a strong visual identity. It's smart. It's not too over the top. It's something that reduces down nicely, that's iconic at a small size. This wild ventures from the icon to the typography is just wonderful here. Lots of good examples here of logo design. Furniture taxi, another good one. Such a simple idea, right? Just, again, iconic. It's just totally simplifying this idea of like furniture and taxi and merging them. And sometimes when you see it and you're like, oh, like when you say like, of course, like it's, a good logo when you see it, you're like, oh, that makes a good logo. But that doesn't mean it was obvious, and it could have taken a really long time to come up with that idea and to simplify it so much to an iconic symbol that logo designs can actually take a long time. So don't think that their simplicity means that they're easy to do. In fact, they're quite hard to do well. Book design. I used to work in a design studio that did a lot of books, and in fact worked on the redesign of Jansen's History of Art. We won second place in the New York Book Show that year. And when I told people that I worked on books, design books that it said, oh, so you do the cover, and I'm like, well, that's one of the things that I do, but like there's also like the 1,000 pages that come in between. So book design is there's a lot of work that goes into book design. There's of course the cover, but then there's also all of the pages that are built in with all the graphics and the typography and the layout of all of those things. This is actually a project that does more than just books in this case. And let's go back to the other work here. See if there was another book. No, I think that's the only book here right now. Oh, there's another book. Yeah, so there's the covers, but then there's also the stuff inside. Oh, this might be a magazine. But so, magazine, books, pretty similar. Lots of pages, lots of graphics, visuals. So if you can lay out dozens and dozens and dozens of pages like this, you can certainly design one page. But lots of design goes into magazines, books, those types of things. There's a lot of work involved in creating those. So yeah, so somebody's got to lay out all those pages of every book and every magazine. Now, moving towards digital stuff, social media graphics, all those graphics that you see that companies are posting. And I'm not just talking about advertisements, but like when they post on their social media. Just having text is not going to be as compelling as having a visual. Now, those visuals could be video, but they could be static graphics, like in this case. It just takes a moment for this to load. So in this case, this particular company, they're trying to raise awareness about certain things, and those certain topics change every once in a while. So somebody will go and create these graphics, and in this case, they're giving them to people and saying, hey, share these graphics, like raise awareness for certain messages that we're going through. Somebody had to design these. And let's say it's your company that wants to get a message through. Instead of just making a text-only post, making a visual that's going to catch somebody's eye, because there's color and there's design and there's layout and there's photography. It's going to be much more compelling. It's going to catch their eye much more when they're scrolling through their feed, rather than just reading through some text. But the photos need to be chosen, the graphics, the colors, the layout, making sure that it's legible on a mobile device. There's lots of things to consider when designing those social media graphics. So good looking social media graphics, that they need to be designed as well. It's about visually communicating things. Now, PowerPoint doesn't get a lot of love in the graphic design industry too much, just because a lot of designers look down upon PowerPoint. But I think that's because they're looking down upon the default templates and how people are using the default templates and doing bad design. An app does not make you a good designer, and in most cases, as long as it's somewhat powerful, any good designer can make good looking stuff in many different apps. So PowerPoint itself is actually a very powerful design tool, and most designers don't know PowerPoint, and they just think of it as the default templates. But you don't even have to use those default templates. You can completely customize things and make it your own with completely custom graphics, custom typography, things that would never look like a normal PowerPoint, because you're not using any of the default things. So you can incorporate video, you can incorporate animation. This is a very simple kind of graphical presentation, but a lot of presentations incorporate video and animation, and they can incorporate sound, and it can be a lot of different elements to what you're designing. And a good PowerPoint designer can create a beautiful presentation that can be very empowering to the person giving it, very, very powerful message. And when you're watching a presentation, if that's beautifully designed, and it's going to be more impactful to you, and you'll be more moved by a better looking presentation. So I know some people that are just purely presentation designers, and that's all they do. In the design industry, most designers don't know PowerPoint. So that's kind of a niche area that if you like design and you like presentations, or if that's an area that interests you, that could be a place where you set yourself apart from your average designer, because most designers don't want to learn PowerPoint. They normally are used to Adobe software. PowerPoint works different. And I understand it's frustrating when you're learning a new program, but a lot of designers just don't want to use it. They maybe don't like designing that type of content, but you can make some great looking presentations. So That's not something your average designer does, but there's a lot of PowerPoint presentations that are being created at companies. And if they look good, then that's going to help the company. And so that's another area. So I like to point it out, but it's not one that your average designer thinks about. It's more of a niche area. So as far as apps for graphic designer, the first three are the primary ones. PowerPoint is not your thing that your average designer knows, but like I said, I wanted to throw that in there as kind of a more of a niche kind of area. So most designers don't know PowerPoint, which would set you apart if you do know PowerPoint and you're a good designer. That is an interesting, different marketable skill. But most designers are going to know things like Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. Photoshop is for photo retouching, and it can also, beyond photo retouching, it can do all sorts of graphics. It could do graphics for social media, for websites, for pretty much anything. You can create animated GIFs in it. Photoshop is very, very versatile. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of design. It's not just for photo retouching, although that is its main focus, but it's also very good at creating general graphics as well. So Photoshop is a widely used program amongst all different types of photographers and designers. InDesign is more print-oriented. While it can do some digital work, it is not primarily focused at digital. It's primarily focused at print. So it's great for doing books and magazines and posters and brochures and any sort of print-related documents. Also very good at creating PDFs. So if you want to create a good, high-quality PDF with lots of control over the PDF, InDesign is also good at doing high-quality PDFs, which are either could be printed or could be electronically distributed as well. So that's what InDesign is good at. InDesign is good at multiple page layouts, although it can do a single page like a poster or a business card, letterhead or something. But it's primarily really good at lots of text and images coming together, lots of pages. It can handle multiple pages to create books and magazines. So multi-page documents are no problem for InDesign. So InDesign is general page layout, more focused on print and PDF creation. Illustrator is for doing vector drawing. So things like logos are created in Illustrator. Patterns, fashion designers often use Illustrator. You can do graphics for all different types of medium. It could be for print, it could be for web or apps. It is a general drawing tool, so people draw icons and logos and different kind of graphics in Illustrator. And the beauty of Illustrator is that it can make those graphics any size you want. So it can be big, it can be small, because they are vector graphics, and that's why people draw their logos in Illustrator. Also packaging, a lot of packaging is done in Illustrator as well because it's a very precise drawing tool. So package designers also typically use Illustrator quite a lot as well. So those are kind of general graphic design apps. So most graphic designers are going to know Photoshop, Illustrator, and if they're doing some print work, they'll know InDesign. If you want to learn graphic design, we have a graphic design certificate. I'm going to come back and talk about other types of graphic design, of course. We're not done here yet, but we have a graphic design certificate. And in that graphic design certificate, we have, if we look at the syllabus, we have courses in InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. Those are the apps. So you learn the different apps, but they don't automatically make you a designer. The graphic design bootcamp is where you actually work on understanding the concepts of what makes good design, composition, color, balance, those types of things, and working on developing and expanding your portfolio. So you work on actual design projects. So work on designing a logo, for example, and work with typography in that. So first you have to learn the apps so that you know how to build something, but then you study about what should you build, what makes something good, and start to build out your projects. Now, UI and web design, another type of graphic design, because graphic design is a wide umbrella of lots of different types of design. So in UI, which is user interface design, user interface is anything where you as a user is interfacing or working with something. So that could be apps, websites, or really any digital product that has some sort of interface. And you're going to be designing the layout, the typography, the color, the composition, and also the interactivity of it as well. Sometimes people say UI, sometimes they say visual design, sometimes they say web design. If I say visual design or UI design, I don't know what kind of design specifically. It could be apps, it could be websites, it could be both. UI just means some sort of user interface. Now, if somebody says specifically, I'm a web designer, then I know that they're doing websites in particular, and maybe they don't do apps, for example. But a visual designer or a UI designer, they could do a wide variety of things. They could do emails, they could do apps, they could do websites, they could do social media posts, right? So basically, now a UI designer, would they be designing social media graphics? Depends on how much they focused only on UI designers. What you'll notice is that there's a lot of overlap in certain types of design, and so it depends on how much somebody focuses on just one area. Visual design I think of as kind of a broader area, because anything that's kind of visual, it's newer. So typically visual designers are digital designers. Normally a print designer won't call themselves a visual designer. So visual is normally some sort of digital medium. The thing that separates user interface or app or web design from things that are static and non-moving like print is that these visual digital mediums, there's user interaction, there's animation, there's video. So how do people use it? So there's extra thoughts into how something works, not just how it looks. So that's another layer of design that we have to think about, that we don't have to think about with something like print. So I know you've all seen websites, but let's take a look at a couple nice examples of websites, things that I think are nice in terms of visually beautiful and also working nicely too. So Stripe is always pushing the envelope and always doing beautiful websites. In this case, they have this cool animated gradient up here at the top. Lots of websites are once Stripe redesigns themselves, a lot of websites copy them because they kind of do cool design that other people are like, oh, I like that, and then they unfortunately get copied. The Stripe design team is clearly has some talented designers and talented coders that can execute these things as well. So just overall, just a visually beautiful, nice typography, nice color, composition, nice little animations every once in a while. Not too over the top with the animations, but nice, just some things to kind of catch your attention. The stripe that's there, the slash, is actually integrated into their identity. So the Stripe logo actually has a slash in the T and the I and the P. So that slash comes from the Stripe logo and is pulled into other parts of their identity. So that slash that's there, that diagonal line, that's something that is part of their identity. Now, they don't overuse it. So sometimes they have straight lines, and then sometimes they have the diagonals. Sometimes they mix in a little bit of extra something over here. Beautiful. Again, these are technologically complex to even code. So they have good coders to support their designers as well. So these are actually like little interactive things, and you can drag them around, which is cool. Here we go back to the straight line. So they're not overdoing their slash, their diagonal line too much. They're integrating it sometimes, but not making you sick of it. Like every single thing has to have it. They have a nice color scheme. They have little animations sprinkled throughout where it's not in your face annoying you, but just little fun things to watch every once in a while. And just clean, spacious, but there's a lot of information in here made into an approachable way. Nice headings and subheadings and use of color. It's a beautiful website. And all the other pages are also really nice too. On a very different kind of feeling, this is a much more simple kind of website here. This is an expensive hat maker. The reason I wanted to show this is because it's such a simple idea of a site of just here's the different hats. But they did little design touches which are just really nice and kind of make it memorable. So here when I hover over a particular hat, the name slides down, but the hat, it doesn't just raise up, it kind of tilts, it rotates. And if you ever have somebody greet you with a hat in the old-fashioned way, they'd like lift their hat up towards you, they'd kind of tilt the hat towards you. So I feel like this is like the old school way of like tilting your hat at somebody and acknowledging them like, hello, how are you? And so then you can click on it, and then we go to another page, and the hat slides in. And again, notice how it slides in. It doesn't just slide in horizontally like a standard slideshow like we've seen a million times. It floats in. So it slides in and then drops down. and the shadow stays where it is on the bottom. So with this hat being up a little higher coming down to the shadow, it actually adds some depth, as though the hat is kind of being thrown into the ring, right? Thrown into there, and just gives the hat a little bit of liveliness. These are $1,250 hats, so these are expensive hats. So they're finding a way to make this site interesting and elevating the quality of the site in a way that you've never quite seen it before. Like, I've never seen a slideshow do exactly this. I've seen many slideshows, but never quite one exactly like this. And so they just took an interesting little twist and made it just a little different and made it memorable, I think. And it makes sense, conceptually makes sense as to why they're doing this. And, it often, in a website, you just need like one interesting thing to kind of make your site unique. There was a great talk, I don't know who was speaking about it. It was many years ago, so I don't remember the details. I don't have the video, but it was a gentleman speaking about logo design. And with designing a logo, it's hard to boil something down to its essence. So it's visually simple, but yet interesting and memorable, works small. And so his kind of point was, when you find a visual trick, a visual catch, like something to make something interesting and unique, don't dilute it with lots of different things. Like, don't feel like you have to have another one and putting in tons of different visual tricks. Just go with one. Just make it that one interesting thing. Like Stripe, simple with just the little slash. And in this case, the website's very simple, but they have this kind of lively, like, fall into place. Same thing when we go back to this, it just tips. So one little trick, and they don't overdo it. It's just enough to make it interesting and memorable and ties it all together into one cohesive design. Now, Harvard Law Review. Just in your mind, are you picturing a beautiful website for Harvard Law Review? It's the law. So clearly there's really probably not going to be many visuals, if any, in terms of photos or graphics. It's going to be text, and you're probably thinking, it's going to be dry and boring because it's law. Who gets visually excited about the law? But it's a beautiful website, and if it's text, how can you make text as beautiful as possible? You start with a beautiful typeface. You do put graphics in to some extent. You can use color. And you can use line, and you can use shape, and you can use color, and different typefaces that work well together. And those typefaces actually help you to understand the roles of what the different typefaces do. That this is the byline, this is kind of the category, this is the article title, and you put little visuals, and those backgrounds add a little bit of color, so it's not boring. The top up here, the navigation is white, but the rest of the page is kind of an off-white, so the navigation sets off from the rest of the page, and that background being a little bit off-white feels more like paper, and also cuts down the contrast, so it's a little bit easier to read, because if your type has too much contrast, it can be hard to read. So not only does that kind of pay homage to paper and tradition, but it also, even on a screen, has a purpose. It makes it easier to read, so your eyes don't get strained too much. The columns are not too wide, so the text doesn't become hard to read. The footnotes are not in some other place. They're right there where you need them to be. So like one, you can go there. They don't want it to overpower the page, so they hide them unless you need them. If you need them, you can read more, but otherwise they simplify them so they don't overwhelm the page. So it's beautifully designed. And then even like just to the diamond there, diamonds normally are elegance and elevate something, and they just add a nice little visual break in the monotony of text, and again a little bit of touch of color, so they're not overdoing things. And then down at the bottom of the page, when you might be interested in reading another article, there's a beautiful read next with some nice space and ways to go to the next or previous, well actually I guess these are just two other articles. Join a mailing list, beautiful type. You can enter in your email address, nice balanced design with a little logo here for the Harvard Law Review, just beautifully designed. And so just because you're limited to just text doesn't mean you're limited in having a bad design. Like you can make beautiful design even just with type, because type can be art in and of itself. Now, with apps, you can kind of do whatever you want with apps. There are certain apps that will look like a standard iOS app or a standard Android app, but for the most part, apps are kind of like, you want to make your app feel like it's its own thing, that it's different from everybody else. So these are just some examples of different trends and things that are going on in app design, but each app can do a certain task. It focuses on doing one thing. So like if you're a weather app, you only have to display the weather. You don't have to worry about other things. And so each app kind of can focus just on that one individual task and what it needs to do and how it needs to work. So there's lots of different things you can do and experiment with in app design, and you can tailor it specifically to the needs of your particular app. And every app in what it does is different. And so you really have to start from, what does that app do? And what's going to allow you to do that task as efficiently as possible? So for example, like the design of TikTok is going to be very different than the design of a weather app, which is going to be different than the design of a news app, so versus a game, everyone is different. So yes, there can be certain things that people do with a lot of different apps. Like a lot of apps have tab bars at the bottom to switch between different areas of the app. So there are kind of common interfaces, but at the same time, there's a lot of creativity that's often done in apps because they do something specialized, and you're trying to find what's the best way to do that specialized task. So there's a lot of interactivity and thought that needs to be put into the user experience in addition to just how it looks when you're designing an app. So as far as designing apps or websites or digital stuff with user interface design, website design, Adobe Xd and Sketch are similar apps to each other. Adobe Xd and Sketch are competitors from two different companies. They basically fundamentally do the same thing. Sketch is a Mac-only design app. Adobe Xd works on Mac and PC. They both essentially let you design any sort of digital type experience. So websites, apps, any sort of digital product. So you can do social media graphics, and pretty much anything you want that's a kind of digital design. Adobe Xd and Sketch are apps that you can use for that. A lot of people had historically used Photoshop to do that before things like Sketch and Adobe Xd came out. But now the industry is essentially switching from Photoshop over to Sketch and Adobe Xd to do that type of work. That doesn't mean that we still don't use Photoshop. We absolutely do, but we use it for doing things like photo editing to bring into Sketch and Adobe Xd. There might be graphics that we still create for that, like you still might do some photo retouching in a social media post, and then since you're already in Photoshop, you might throw some type on it and just do it all in Photoshop. So Photoshop it's like the Swiss Army knife. You can do so many different things with it. But if you just want to design a website or you just want to design an app, Adobe XD or Sketch are definitely a better choice because they are modern visual design apps that are focused on doing visual design, user experience design, which is thinking about how something works. What's the experience of using something? That's what user experience design is all about. But Photoshop goes with those apps, and we can use it to complement those. Same thing with Illustrator. While you can draw in Sketch and Adobe XD, there might be things you want to draw in Illustrator. It does have certain drawing features that are not found in Sketch and Adobe XD. And you might be drawing icons and things that you can pull into those other apps. So it's often used in conjunction with these other apps. If you're going to get into coding, because web design, there's also coding. It's not really design, but it's coding. If you're going to code the designs that you build, or maybe somebody else designs and they give it to you to code, there are code editors like Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text where you can turn a design into code, but you would need to know coding languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's not really design, but in terms of web design, if somebody says they're a web designer, that may include coding. So there could be visual design with Adobe Xd or Sketch, as well as development, as well as coding. I don't know what a web designer does until I ask them, do you do coding? Do you do design? What's your mixture? Some people do more coding, some people do more design, some people only do design, they don't do any coding. So it kind of brings up the question, if you're getting into web design in particular, should you learn to code? Now, if you're getting into app design coding is difficult. You're not just going to dabble in app coding. If you're going to learn how to build apps, learn how to build apps and become an app developer and go that way. Designers don't typically dabble in that sort of stuff. But web design code is easier to do. So that's something that web designers can be learning, and I think is actually very useful for them to learn. So we think that web coding skills are very helpful for designers. It doesn't mean that you have to code all day long and that you're going to purely become a developer or coder, but knowing code is going to help you in many ways. Code is just how websites work. So by understanding the code, you understand better how the web itself works. Just like when I was getting into print design and we went on press and I learned how a printing press works, I better understood how the printing process worked. And that helped my designs to be better because I wouldn't do things that would be bad on a printing press. Same thing for the web. I won't do things that are bad to code because when I'm designing, I won't do bad things that are going to be bad to code because I understand how the web is coded. So I'm going to avoid those things and not do those. So it can avoid certain problems. So coding is going to help you to do better design because you'll avoid problems that your developer will say, oh, I can't do that. And they'll kick back your design and say, you got to redo it. And also, if you are a designer working with a developer, and maybe you do some coding, but you're going to work with other developers to do the rest of it, you can communicate better with developers if you at least understand something about code. Again, it doesn't mean you have to do purely coding and do no design, but the more you know about code, the better you'll understand how the web works, how to talk to developers. It also, just so you know what's possible. And, can I do this? And can I not do this? Like, for example, there was a day many years ago where we could not do custom web fonts. Like this custom web font here, many years ago, I could not do that in a web page. But nowadays I can. So just knowing what you can and can't do in a website so a developer doesn't say, oh, you can't do that, you got to change that. It helps you to understand that. And also, I think this is very important too, when you're doing a design, is something easy to do or is it something hard? Because if it's hard, it'll be more time consuming and more costly. So maybe you say, well, I'll leave that for version 2. We'll come back to that and do it. In version 1, I'll keep it simpler so I know that it'll cost the client less and we'll be able to do it before the time runs out on the project because I know this project is running behind and we need to get this done quickly, so I'll avoid doing the hard thing. I'll do the easy thing for now and maybe we can come back and do the other thing later when we have more time and we have more budget. Now, when you're doing websites, it's not just about the visual design and how it looks, but there's also can be animation. There's not just one technology that we use to animate on the web. There are a variety of different ones. Used to be that in the very early days, we only had animated GIFs. So animated GIFs they've been around for a long, long time. Then Flash came about, but Flash kind of rose and fell, and so now we can't use Flash on the web anymore. But animated GIFs are still here, and not only can you use animated GIFs in your website, but they're also heavily used in emails because emails are old school technology. They're kind of like the way that websites used to be a long time ago. You can't do a lot of the fancier, cooler things that we can do in a website in an email. Emails just use older technology. But animated GIFs still work well. So if you want to animate something in an email, animated GIFs are the way to go. Now, Adobe After Effects. After Effects, you can do much cooler animations, crazy, cool stuff. You could do After Effects is so powerful. You could do so much stuff with that. That could be used for video. It's animation and visual effects for video. And you can do that for video or for animated GIFs. So if you want to create some really complex animated GIFs, you can do that with After Effects. If you're doing a simple animated GIF, I think After Effects is probably a bit overkill. So for example, Photoshop is actually a place where you can create nice, simple, quick to create animated GIFs. So if you're creating simple animated GIFs, quick, short ones, Photoshop is kind of ideal for that. If you want something more complex, maybe something longer or just harder to animate, then After Effects can do more. And After Effects is not just limited to animated GIFs, you can also do video as well. Now, within a web page itself, in the coded web page, we use JavaScript to animate things within the web page. There are animation-specific coding libraries like GreenSock. GreenSock is a JavaScript library, so it's a coded library, meaning that they give you functions that are appropriate for coding animations to coding those animations much easier. So you can create them faster and more powerfully and do stuff that would be very hard to do with plain JavaScript. They make it easy to do with GreenSock. I'll show you some examples of this in just a little bit. And then there's CSS animation. CSS animation could be something like when you hover over something and it gets a little bit bigger. Simple little animations can be done through coding CSS, but it's not really great for doing longer, more complicated animations, just simple things here and there. For anything slightly more complex, if you want it coding it in the web page that you're actually animating the web page elements, you're using JavaScript or probably GreenSock in particular. If it's a video or animated GIF you're putting into the page, either Photoshop or After Effects to create that animated GIF or like video. You can also use Premiere Pro if you're just doing video editing as well. But here we're talking more about video animation than video editing. So just some examples. This is a very simple animated GIF. This would be quick to create, just putting photo, photo, photo in Photoshop. Now, Photoshop can do more than just this, of course, too. But this is an example of a simple animated GIF. At its simplest, an animated GIF can be kind of picture, 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 and it can be something like this. Now, making a GIF more complex, this is also an animated GIF. It doesn't look like pictures at all. There's tons of things moving around. This would be basically impossible to create in Photoshop. So something like this would need to be created in Adobe After Effects, where you can do a lot more complex animations with something like this. And these are some examples of things like that would be good in an email, right? So catches your attention, something's moving, and draws your eye into that email, like, oh, something moved, instead of just a static email. Now, GreenSock in particular, if you're coding interactive animations or even just animations you look at, this McDonald's 100 Moments, this was created many years ago. This is back from 2013, but it's still, I love that they still have it up, and it's still really cool. It's kind of, it loads, takes a little while to load because there's a lot of stuff in it. There's graphics, there's sound, there's a bunch of things in there. All right, so I can hit skip. All right, so here as I hover over, I hear a little like tap, 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 taps. I hear little clicks. I can move around. When I move around, there's a subtle zoom out and then zoom in, like it kind of bounces away and towards me, which is cool. Then I can click on any one to open it up. They load an animation, and they say to click and swipe in different directions to discover the moment. So you can do a little Fruit Ninja style swiping. So they have fun little animations for each one of these. So click on it, wait for the animation to load. So this would all be done with something like JavaScript, in particular GreenSock. The smoothness of the animation it's super smooth animation. The frame rates are very high. GreenSock has got amazing performance. It's just the speed and quality of the animations that GreenSock does is just really good quality. Super smooth, really cool. On a much more simple kind of thing, in this case, timed animations, sequential stuff where one thing happens, another thing happens, another thing happens. That's what GreenSock is great at, is triggering certain things after certain things and creating a sequence of events. It can also do scrolling based animations too. So here there's a bunch of things happening, things rotating, things moving, things fading in and out. Again, there's a sequence of things happening in a certain order. So GreenSock has these things called timelines, where it's a coded timeline, but you can set that one thing happens after another after another. So just having these little animations throughout the page just makes the page more interesting and catches your eye. So if you're interested in web design in particular, we have a variety of different certificates. We have a web design certificate, which is mainly focused on coding with some graphics and email. So with the web design certificate, if I take a look at the syllabus of what's in here, that goes into web coding classes with the web development classes, Flexbox, JavaScript. But it does also get into graphics with things like Adobe Xd, so you get some graphics in there, and some encoding HTML emails. With something like the visual design, that focuses on just designing the visuals of things. So that's focused on Photoshop, Illustrator, Adobe Xd, and then the design concepts of graphic design. And the visual design class is basically a web design class, like what makes a good looking website, what are the trends, what's going on in web design. So once you learn the apps to create graphics and icons and design web pages in, then you can study the fundamentals of graphic design and apply them to web pages, in particular with the visual design. And these are the what makes good design classes, not just learning the apps. You need to learn both sides of those things if you're interested in becoming a visual designer. If you want to combine those two things together, we have a web and visual design certificate that combines both of those certificates into one. And if you're more interested in user experience, in addition to the visual design, we've got a UX and UI certificate. And in that, you get to learn design app like Sketch. I believe we're going to be switching this momentarily over to Adobe Xd, but you'll learn your design app as well as user experience design. So user experience design is about how something works. It's about understanding users, testing on users, and making sure that things are good for people, that it's easy to use, that people understand how to use it, that they're enjoying using it. So if you're doing user experience and user interface, you want to know your design apps like Photoshop and Illustrator, a web or app design specific design app, as well as the principles of UX and web design. So visual design, again, is primarily focused on web design, what makes good websites or what makes good UX design. If you're interested in a new computer, for the most part, most of these apps will work fine on any decent Mac or PC. Most designers use Macs. You can do most of the stuff on Mac or PC though, but typically, just so you know, the design industry is mostly Macs, and there are some apps that are only on Mac, like Sketch, for example, is a Mac-only app. Final Cut Pro is by Apple. That's a video editing app, and that only works on a Mac. So there are some that are Mac-specific. Vice versa, there are some PC-only apps or apps that just run better. Like PowerPoint runs on Mac and PC, but it's just better on Windows. Which is kind of funny because PowerPoint was a Mac-only design app before Microsoft purchased it. And so they actually purchased this app and then turned it into a better on Windows app. But you can do it on Mac and PC, but especially if you're doing a lot of PowerPoint design for businesses that typically run Windows, PowerPoint is better on Windows. Same thing with AutoCAD. AutoCAD does have a Mac version, but it's not nearly as good as the Windows version. So. But for the most part, most of the apps are going to work on Mac and PC, and any sort of decent Mac or PC should work. If you're buying a new computer, most of them today do have SSDs, which are solid-state drives. So you're probably not going to be getting a regular hard drive, but just in case, especially if you're getting a PC, like a really cheap PC, don't save the money and just go with a regular hard drive. They're much, much slower. Make sure you get an SSD. They're much, much faster. So at some point, they won't be selling computers with hard drives anymore. They'll all be SSDs. But just in case that happens, just make sure you're getting an SSD. It's going to make it much faster. If you're getting a new Mac, Apple is transitioning from Intel-based Macs to Apple Silicon, which is now currently M1. They'll be coming out with other ones in the future, like probably M2s or something like that. But Apple Silicon Macs are the future. They are quite a few of the things have already transitioned over to that, like now the iMac, the MacBook, the smaller MacBooks. Now the MacBook Pro, like 16-inch, still Intel-based. It's not Apple Silicon yet. But basically, the Intel-based Macs are being phased out. They are much slower compared to the Apple Silicon Macs. So If you want to be future-proofing and getting a faster, newer generation computer, look for the Apple Silicon Macs. They're going to be the preferred compared to the older Intel-based Macs, which are being phased out, and therefore would be made kind of obsolete sooner. So if you get Apple Silicon, you'll get more life out of it. For anybody, Mac or PC, just make sure you get a high-res display. Whether it's a built-in display, most laptops these days are now coming with high-res displays. Apple calls them Retina displays for their branding, but they're high-res displays. Most laptops these days are coming with those high-res displays. If you're getting an external monitor, an HD is high definition, but that is not actually a high-res display. An HD display is not considered high-res. 4K is. 4K is actually 2 HD monitors wide and 2 HD monitors tall. So it's actually 4 HD monitors put into one. It's like four, I know it's 4,000 pixels, but it's like 4 HD monitors in one. That is a high definition display. So I know that they called it HD because it was high definition at the time. There was standard definition, then there was high definition. So 4K is ultra high definition. That is what I'm talking about. That's a high-res display. So 4K, 5K, 6K, 8K, those are all high-res monitors. Don't get a low-res monitor. Don't cheap out. Just buy a low-res monitor. The future is high-res. That's what you want to see, what everybody else is seeing. So make sure you get a high-res monitor if you're getting an external monitor. Or make sure you're getting a good display built into your laptop. Also, one thing I didn't put here, but if you're getting into video apps are more demanding. So you want something with more RAM and better video card, like a dedicated video card, if you're getting more into the video and animation side. Because anything like After Effects, Adobe Premiere, those video editing and animation programs, they especially need more RAM and better video cards. So don't just get like if you're on, especially like on Windows, getting Intel integrated graphics with no dedicated video card, make sure you get a dedicated video card. Don't skimp out on the video specs and the RAM if you're getting into video and animation. For the other things, they're not nearly as demanding. So, final topic here, portfolios. I'm going to take a look at a few different portfolios here. And it doesn't really matter so much about what exactly they're putting in their portfolio here, because you can slot in different types of work in these different portfolio presentations. So in part, don't just look at the quality of their work, but look at the presentation, the way that they're showing the work. And I tried to choose a variety of different ways that they're presenting. In this case, it's a very simple presentation. Very even grid here, just nice large examples. And it's great to have large examples here, because even if I don't go to any other page, just scrolling through here, I see some beautiful visuals here. And so let's say I click on something. So here, the client, personal. So this is a personal project they did. They did 3D and computer generated images. So they did some 3D work here. And just nice big examples here. And clearly can do good three-dimensional work. It's nicely designed, nice color palette, clearly has skills working 3D apps. And well, let's just go to another one here. Let's click on this one here. And again, 3D, CG, computer-generated images. And again, nice looking stuff here. But the presentation's easy. When you get down to the bottom, I like that there's a next button. Just go right into the next. And then you can go through that one, look through that. And when you get to the bottom, once again, you get to the next. It makes it so effortless to go to the next thing, so you don't have to keep going back to work. Have an easy way to get to the next project. It could be to the previous project, but especially the next. You just want to keep going next, next, next. It makes it easier for people reviewing your portfolio, because if you're sending your portfolio to anybody reviewing a lot of resumes, imagine they're getting 100 resumes. And if they need to review 100 portfolios, even if they just give you 1 minute, that's it. That's still 100 minutes. That's over an hour and a half of time if everybody just gets 1 minute. So anybody reviewing portfolios wants to get through them as quickly as possible. Make it as easy as possible. Make nice, big visuals. Make it easy to navigate through. And when you get to the bottom, give them a way to get to a next project. In this case, they get to choose what the next project is to jump there. And again, you can go through nice big visuals. There is some text that describes what the project is about if people want to read it, but if not, people can skip over that and just look at the visuals. And again, at the bottom, you can choose what's the next project and jump into whatever project you want. So they made it easy to get to the next project. This one, even simpler. You can't get simpler than one page. This is just graphic after graphic. There's no clicking, no nothing, just graphic after graphic, project after project. All of these are, of course, beautiful, good typography, beautiful photography, and just all sorts of different types of things. There's lettering, there's packaging, definitely a lot of packaging, clearly. But this, to be honest, I don't know what that is, but it's interesting looking, catches my eye. Beautiful typography here, that's just gorgeous. Must be getting into doing some type design, so I'm guessing they do type design too. Interesting colors, yeah, and then so then you get all the way to the bottom, and email, social media, you get in touch with them. And if you go to information, you can probably learn more about him. But for the most part, just the homepage just gets right into the work, and there's no clicking or anything. It works great on mobile because the things are as big as they can be on mobile. So I wanted to show an example of something that could be super, super simple that doesn't have to be super complex. And then this one here, let's go two more. Now this one's a web design one. This is an agency. So they worked on some big projects like LandRover.com. And so they've got some animation here showing what it looks like on desktop and mobile, showing you what it looks like on a device. So there's some nice imagery, talks about the project. And then when you get all the way down to the end, the role, the employer, the client, and then you can get into the next or previous project. So you go into the next one and you get to that one. And again, visuals. In this case, it looks like there's a video that you could watch. So that's a nice way to show some web design. And one last one here. Kind of ending on a more simple note here. Kind of another grid of different projects. Click on one. Simple, clean layout. Nice big visuals. You want to always have nice, clean, easy to look at visuals. Nice big examples so people can see the details. And then at the end, make it easy for people to go to a next or other project. And even though all of those do that, don't think that all portfolios do those things. I chose portfolios that show those things, but there's a ton of portfolios I've gotten to that don't do those things. Ones that have small little examples, they make it hard to go to the next project. So don't take those things for granted, even though my examples all had those. So when you're building a portfolio, you're going to start out as a beginning designer. You need to build a portfolio, and you're probably only going to have a few projects. Leave room for more. Know that you're going to have them later, but you're going to start out with a couple of them, and that's okay. You're getting started. It's better to have a few good projects than a lot of just okay ones. So in the beginning, focus on the quality, not the quantity. I want to see good projects. I'd rather see 3 good projects than 5 just okay ones. Because if I see 3 good ones, you're 100% good. But let's say the same 3 good ones are there, but then you also add 2 just okay ones. You brought your average down. Now 2 out of 5, you're just okay. Before, you were 3 out of 3, you were good. So quality is what's most important, I think. And it's okay to include fictional or practice projects. Just say it's a concept, or like the one website said, client personal. Like, yeah, it was your own project. That's okay, because good work is good work. Even if you're doing it for yourself, just for your portfolio, not everybody is capable of doing good design work. So I don't really care whether it's a good client or not, or a real client or not. If it's good work, it's good work. A couple examples. There was a guy who had done a redesign of AmericanAirlines.com. This was many, many years ago. And he kind of went viral because it was like a college kid had done it for like his final project. And it was amazing. It was so good. Everybody was saying, this is how AmericanAirlines.com should be. And it was just a fictional project, but it was so good. And it went around and people were talking about it. I don't think he had anything else in his portfolio, but he had done a really amazing video presentation about the whole redesign, and it was amazing. It was so well presented. And I would have hired him just off that one, because if he could do that one project so well, he's got talent, he could do more. And if there was anything else, I don't remember anything else. Another example is when I was going through, and once I graduated college, I was going through interviewing with different places. I dropped off my portfolio. This was when it was in-person portfolios. You'd physically give them a portfolio, and I'd give my portfolio, and you'd let it there. They'd review it. Later, they'd get in touch with you. And there was a nice woman who had reviewed my portfolio, and she asked me about this one piece that I had done. And I was so excited about the piece because I was like the only person in my graduating class that had like been paid for a specific project. Somebody had come to the college and said, hey, we want to hire one of your designers to design this project, and we're going to pay them. And I was so excited. I'm like, this is my first real job. I got paid. It was a one color job though. Like it was a cheap job. It wasn't the best example of what I could do as a designer, but I thought, well, it's real. I was paid. Therefore, it's important. And the woman reviewing my portfolio was very nice. And I don't remember how much she said versus how much I figured out. But basically, she was like, why is this in your portfolio? And I said, well, I told her the story and how it was my first real client. She's like, it's the worst thing in your portfolio. And like I said, I don't remember how she said it exactly or versus what I took. But the message was, this is not good work. It shouldn't be in your portfolio. Like, just because it was real, she's like, it's not that good. Like, don't let this represent your work. And she was right. She was right. And it was a good learning experience for me to realize it didn't matter that it was real. What mattered is it really wasn't very good. That's what mattered more. You don't want, quote, real projects to say you really do bad work. So you want to have good stuff. If you need ideas of things to put in your portfolio, think of things from a commercial sense. What would you be hired to do? So for any sort of business, they do social media graphics, they do email promotions. Just think about anything that a company needs, websites, apps, and do something that a business would need. Because then if you're working at a business, they might need you to do those things. Or if you're working at a design studio that businesses will hire, the business is going to hire those design studios to do those things. So your portfolio should show people those types of things, because if you're going to be hired by the business, you want them to see it. Or if you're being hired by the design studio, you want them to see that you're creating commercially usable stuff. You could also redesign a restaurant's website, their menu, their logo, whatever it is you want to do. There's tons of restaurants out there, and so many of them do not spend a good amount of money on a good website or their menu or their logo, and they have poorly designed all of it. So you could just look around your neighborhood probably and find some bad website, bad menu, bad logo, and you could redesign it. Or just do something that interests you. One of the people that went through our certificate program, his name is Jonah Shogren, and he wanted to create a website about Astoria, Queens. I used to live in Astoria, Queens. Interesting fact about Astoria, Queens, I don't know if it's still this way, but at one point it was the second highest population of Greeks outside of Greece. So there's a lot of Greek food in Astoria, or at least there was. I know some of the places have closed. But boast.nyc, it's a great domain name. Best of Astoria, right? Boast, best of Astoria, Queens, right? So boast.nyc, and they're boasting because it's the best of. It's great. You got a great domain name. And it's a real thing. He talked to people. He found out what they think is the best bagel place and rates the best bagel places, the best budget places, and so on. You want to go grab a drink, you go to drinks and find out the best place for bubble tea, right? So it's a real site. It gets use by people that are in the area, and it also gave him a lot of practice, and he had to learn how to design it, how to code it, build everything. So he actually did everything from start to finish. He designed it, he coded it, he did everything, and he runs it and he creates all the content for it. So it could be something like I like to call them passion projects, where just something that interests you, something you think is cool that you want to do, and you're going to be able to speak passionately about that because that's going to be something you're interested in. So if somebody's in an interview talking to you about it, you're going to be able to talk about that with a much more interest. You're gonna have more excitement about that because that's something you like, and it could be on anything. And then it could be a useful thing that you put out there for the world. Or you could just do it for your portfolio, and that's enough. So these are just a couple ideas of things to think about. Lots of different things you can do, but always think, is this something that an employer or a business would want to see that's going to be attractive to them, a hireable type thing? So in closing here, design as much as you can. It's practice that's going to make you perfect. The more you design, the better you're going to get. You're going to get practice with your design apps. You're going to get better implementing the principles of good design. And out of all those projects, some of them are going to be good. All designers do bad work some of the time. So you need to go through all the bad stuff and work through all those bad projects so that you can get some of the good ones and you can pull those out. And have fun while you're doing it. Design could be a fun thing. And so that's one of the reasons why I like being a designer, is because I enjoy it. It's a career that I enjoy. I think it's interesting to design. I think it's interesting to code. I love all the different types of apps that I use and the different types of things that I do. So have fun doing it, and that'll make you want to keep creating these projects and fill out your portfolio. And then that joy that you have will show to employers or companies hiring you so that you can, get a job, get work from a client. So if you're interested in learning more in a hands-on class, like we teach at Noble Desktop, these classes are available either live online, so you can live stream them, or you can take them in person in New York City, which is where we're located. Keep in mind that if you are live streaming our courses, they are done Eastern time because we're based in New York City. So that's the time zone that we're in case you're watching this from another time zone. But we have certificate programs or individual classes on different areas of graphic design. So graphic design, web design, and UI, UX, and visual design. So you can check out those courses there. So hopefully we'll see you in one of those classes coming up in the future. And I hope that this has been helpful for you in figuring out what area of graphic design you're most interested in. There are a lot of different ones. Choose one to get started in. If there's lots of different areas, know that you can get started in one and you can always grow into the others. I got started in print design, eventually got into web design, video editing, animation. So they're all related fields, but don't feel like you have to know them all. Get started with the one you're most interested in. And if you want to grow, you can. Or if you just want to stay in that area, that's fine too. So figure out which area you're most interested in and start to practice. And that's how you start to get into graphic design. I hope this has been helpful for you and that you've enjoyed this presentation.